boy woke up trapped inside a roaring metal cage with zero memories of his past, only to be dumped into a giant stone courtyard surrounded by moving 100-foot walls. A teenage boy abruptly awakens inside a dark, clanking underground elevator filled with supplies, having absolutely no memory of who he is or where he came from. Panicked, he reaches to inspect a strange noise coming from one of the supply boxes, only to be startled by a pig hiding inside as the elevator ascends rapidly upward. When the elevator slams to a halt at the top, a set of metal doors slides open to reveal dozens of teenage boys staring down at him. A heavily built boy named Glade jumps into the shaft, mockingly labels him Greenie, and hauls him up onto the grass. Overcome with terror, the newcomer tries to sprint away to escape, only to realize he is surrounded on all sides by colossal stone walls with no visible way out. After a brief chase, he is tackled and thrown into a wooden cage, where the community's leader, Albie, approaches to ask him basic questions. The newcomer nervously admits he can't remember his own name, but Albie reassures him that this is completely normal and that everyone arrives with wiped memories. Albie explains that after a day or two, most boys eventually remember their names, and once the newbie promises not to bolt again, Albie unlocks the cage to show him around. The boys live in a small, self-sustaining sanctuary called the Glade, where they survive by hunting, building shelters, and performing assigned daily chores. Once a month, the elevator, which they refer to as the box, delivers fresh supplies alongside a brand new amnesiac boy who takes on the title of Greenie. Nobody knows who operates the elevator or why they're being kept there, but Albie emphasizes the 3 strict rules of the Glade. Do your part, never harm another Glader, and above all, never enter the giant stone door. A younger boy named Chuck takes over the tour, but the Greenie remains completely obsessed with staring at the massive, open stone doorway in the wall. Suddenly, 2 athletic boys named Ben and Miho emerge from behind the wall, surprising the Greenie since he assumed no one was allowed through the door. Chuck explains that a select group of boys called runners are permitted to enter because they are tasked with mapping out the massive, sprawling maze beyond the walls. Driven by intense curiosity, the Greenie approaches the open doorway to get a closer look, but Gally violently shoves him to the ground for breaking the rules. As the Greenie panics and demands answers, the surrounding boys try to calm him down, only to be interrupted by a sudden, loud mechanical grinding as the massive doors slide shut. That night, the Gladers throw a bonfire party to celebrate the new arrival, where Newt explains that the runners spend every day searching for an exit inside the maze. Newt reveals they have been searching for 3 years without finding a way out, and ominous mechanical roars begin echoing from behind the thick stone walls. He explains that the layout of the maze shifts every single night, and anyone trapped inside after the doors close is killed by terrifying biomechanical monsters called grievers. When the Greenie expresses a desire to become a runner, Newt tells him that runners are handpicked, not volunteered. Shortly after, the Greenie gets pushed into a wrestling ring by Gally, who challenges him to a match where the goal is to push the opponent out of the drawn circle. Gally easily overpowers and mocks him, but the Greenie manages to grab Gally and throw him to the dirt, earning the respect of the crowd before Gally trips him up. Hitting his head hard on the ground, a surge of memory returns to the boy, prompting him to announce to everyone that his name is Thomas. Later that night, Thomas suffers from a strange nightmare involving a high-tech laboratory and a woman's voice repeating the phrase, "Wicked is good." The next morning, Albie takes Thomas to a towering stone wall where every boy has carved their name into the rock, pointing out several crossed-out names belonging to Gladers who died. While searching for fertilizer deep in the woods, Thomas stumbles across an old grave filled with scattered bones, feeling an eerie chill down his spine. Suddenly, a feverish, visibly ill runner named Ben lunges out from the shadows, growling wildly and tackling Thomas violently to the dirt. Ben chokes Thomas while hysterically screaming that he saw Thomas in a vision, blaming him for everything that has happened to them in the Glade. Desperate to survive, Thomas smashes a heavy skull against Ben's face to break free, sparking a high-stakes chase through the dense trees while screaming for help. Just as Ben corners Thomas to execute him, Newt and the other Gladers rush in, tackling the wildly raving boy to the ground and pinning him down. The boys pull up Ben's shirt to reveal a horrifying, swollen puncture mark on his torso, confirming he was stung by a griever in broad daylight inside the maze. Albie explains that getting stung triggers the changing, a painful, mind-shattering infection that turns victims violently insane as their lost memories force their way back. As sunset approaches, the Gladers hold a somber banishment ceremony, using long poles to shove a weeping, screaming Ben into the closing stone doors of the maze to face his fate. That night, Thomas suffers another disturbing dream of a high-tech facility, where a young girl works alongside him on a secret experiment. The next morning, Thomas notices Albie entering the maze alongside Miho to retrace Ben's steps and figure out how a griever managed to sting him during the day. Newt reveals to Thomas that Albie was the very first boy ever sent up in a box, surviving an entire agonizing month completely alone before a second boy arrived. As dusk approaches, a heavy panic settles over the Glade as Albie and Miho fail to return before the massive stone doors begin their slow closing sequence. Right before the gap seals shut, Miho appears in the distance, struggling to drag a completely unconscious, stung Albie toward the exit. Realizing the pair won't make it in time, and knowing that entering the maze at night is an automatic death sentence, Thomas makes a split-second decision and sprints into the closing gap. The massive stone door slams shut behind him, trapping Thomas, Miho, and the unconscious Albie inside the lethal labyrinth for the night. Miho warns a panicked Thomas that no one has ever survived a night in a maze, insisting that keeping Albie with them will only get all three of them killed. Refusing to abandon their leader, Thomas uses long vines of ivy running up the colossal stone walls to hoist Albie's body high off the ground, tying him securely out of reach. As ominous mechanical screeches echo through the dark corridors, Miho vanishes into the shadows, leaving Thomas alone to face the terrifying creatures hunting in the dark. A terrifying griever, a biomechanical monstrosity made of metallic legs and living flesh, crawls past the ivy, missing Thomas by mere inches as he holds his breath in total silence. A thick, disgusting slime suddenly drips onto Thomas's shoulder, and he looks up to see a massive griever perched directly above him on the stone wall. The creature drops to the ground and aggressively gives chase, forcing Thomas to sprint for his life through the dark, twisting corridors until he hits a dead end. Thomas frantically climbs the ivy-covered wall to escape, making it to a high ledge only to find himself trapped between a sheer drop and a lunging monster. Desperate, Thomas leaps onto a hanging bundle of ivy. The griever jumps after him, extending a sharp mechanical syringe that barely misses stinging Thomas as the vines snap, dropping them both. The fallen beast gets temporarily tangled in the fallen plants, giving Thomas just enough time to break free, sprint down the hall, and bump back into Miho. Realizing the shifting walls of the maze are actively beginning to move and close, Thomas concocts a deadly, split-second plan to use the environment against the monster. Thomas taunts the charging griever into sprinting straight down a narrowing corridor, diving out of the way at the very last second as two massive moving walls slam together, crushing the beast instantly. At sunrise, the Gladers stand in utter disbelief as the massive stone doors slide open, watching Thomas and Miho walk out of the maze carrying a surviving Albie. During an emergency meeting, Glade furiously demands Thomas be punished for breaking the rules, while Miho argues Thomas should be made the new lead runner for doing what no one else could, killing a griever. The heated debate is suddenly cut short as the alarm on the box triggers, baffling the Gladers since the supply elevator was never supposed to return so early. When the doors open, the boys are shocked to find no supplies inside, only an unconscious teenage girl holding a crumpled note that reads, "She's the last one. Ever." To everyone's astonishment, the girl briefly wakes up, recognizes Thomas, and mutters his name out loud before slipping back into a deep coma. Eager for answers, Thomas leads Miho and a small team back into the maze to inspect the crushed griever, where they pry open its metallic carcass and extract a strange, beeping electronic tracking device. The device is stamped with the letters WCKD, the exact same logo printed on all the supply crates delivered to the Glade. Miho takes Thomas to his secret hut housing a complete 3D model of the maze, explaining that the maze is divided into sections 1 through 8 that open in a strict daily rotation. The electronic device they pulled from the griever displays the number 7, leading them to suspect the monsters enter through section 7 of the labyrinth. Suddenly, the unconscious girl wakes up in a panic, climbing to the top of a lookout tower and pelting rocks at the boys until she sees Thomas and calms down. Introducing herself as Teresa, she reveals her only lingering memory matches Thomas's dreams, along with 2 mysterious vials filled with blue liquid she found in her pocket labeled with the WCKD logo. Realizing the blue liquid might be an antidote to the griever's sting, they inject it into the dying Albie, right before Gally locks Thomas in a wooden pit for the night as punishment for breaking Glade rules. The next morning, Thomas is released from the pit and officially inducted as a runner, immediately joining Miho to sprint deep into the heart of the maze. Guided by the strange beeping device pulled from the dead griever, they navigate into Section 7, an area that wasn't supposed to be open for another week. Deep inside, the device's signal grows stronger, leading them across a long metal bridge suspended over a pitch-black, bottomless abyss. When they bring the device close to a solid wall at the end of the bridge, the metal mechanism reacts, sliding open a secret tunnel dripping with thick griever slime. The moment Thomas and Miho step inside, a red laser scanner flashes over them, triggering a loud alarm that causes the entire corridor to violently contract and close. The boys sprint for their lives as the surrounding stone structures shift frantically around them, forcing them to jump across opening chasms and dive through sliding doors to escape. Barely making it back to the Glade alive, Thomas announces to the group that they have finally located the true exit out of the maze. Meanwhile, the blue antidote successfully cures Albie, but as his memories return, a horrified Albie breaks down and reveals that Thomas was always WCKD's favorite insider before he arrived. Before the Gladers can process the shock, night falls, and to everyone's absolute terror, the massive stone doors of the Glade fail to close, leaving them completely unprotected. The nightmare worsens as all 4 massive doors around the Glade slide wide open at once, allowing a pack of screeching grievers to pour directly into the campsite. Pure chaos erupts as the Gladers scatter into the darkness, with monsters tearing through wooden shelters and dragging screaming boys off into the night. A group of boys, including Gally, lock themselves inside the heavy supply box underground to hide, while others hide among the crops as a metallic tail sweeps through the leaves. Thomas, Teresa, and Chuck assemble the surviving boys inside the main council hut, barricading the heavy wooden doors as grievers prowl on the roof above. Suddenly, a griever breaks through the ceiling, grabbing young Chuck with its mechanical claw and pulling him toward a glowing syringe to sting him. Albie bravely leaps forward with an axe, hacking at the metallic arm until Chuck is dropped to safety, but a second griever instantly grabs Albie and drags him out into the dark. With his dying breath, Albie looks at Thomas and begs him to get the remaining boys out of the glade before the monster pulls him away forever. When dawn arrives, the surviving boys emerge to find their home completely destroyed, and a furious Gally violently punches Thomas, blaming his arrival for the entire massacre. Desperate to recover his lost memories and find the missing door code, Thomas grabs a severed griever stinger and deliberately plunges it straight into his own leg. Thomas falls into a deep, feverish trance as the griever venom floods his mind, unlocking suppressed memories of himself and Teresa working side by side for WCKD in a high-tech lab. He wakes up in a wooden pit, saved by Teresa, who used her last remaining vial of blue antidote to purge the venom before it killed him. Thomas confesses the devastating truth to Newt, Miho, and Chuck. The Glade was never a simple prison, but a meticulously engineered test, and he and Teresa were part of the organization running it. Meanwhile, Gally seizes total control of the remaining survivors, blaming Thomas for the destruction and preparing to sacrifice him and Teresa to the grievers to restore peace. Right before Gally's men can tie them up, Thomas overpowers his guard while Miho draws a blade to freeze Gally in his tracks. Thomas delivers a passionate speech, offering the Gladers a choice: stay in the ruined glade to die, or follow him into the maze to fight for their freedom. Rallying half of the Gladers to his side, Thomas leads the group into Section 7, arriving at the long bridge where a massive griever blocks the tunnel exit. Armed with spears and wooden shields, the Gladers charge into battle against the beast, fighting off sharp metallic limbs to hold a defensive perimeter around the door. As the battle rages, Chuck accidentally drops the key device, but Teresa recovers it just as a second griever crawls up from the abyss to flank the group. Teresa and Chuck scramble into the control tunnel, encountering a high-tech door that requires an 8-digit passcode to unlock. Realizing the code corresponds to the sequence in which the maze sections open daily, Miho yells out the numbers while battling the monsters outside. Teresa punches in the final number just as the heavy door seals shut, sliding down massive hydraulic blades that instantly crush the pursuing grievers. Crossing through the blast door, the battered survivors find themselves in a sprawling, modern facility filled with bullet-riddled control rooms and dead scientists. Thomas activates a recorded video message from Dr. Ava Page, who reveals that a massive solar flare scorched the Earth, unleashing a brain-rotting virus called the flare that wiped out billions. She explains that the Gladers were born with natural immunity, making their brain activity during the high-stress maze trials the key to engineering a cure for humanity. The recording ends with Dr. Page appearing to shoot herself in the head as heavily armed soldiers storm the laboratory in the background. Suddenly, a crazed, stung Gally appears from the shadows with a gun. Miho impales him with a spear, but a stray bullet strikes young Chuck in the chest, killing him instantly. Heavily armed mercenaries burst into the lab, ushering a grieving Thomas and his survivors into a helicopter that lifts off over the ruined landscape, while a very much alive Dr. Page announces to her board that Phase 2 is officially beginning.